What if I told you the real war shaping your life isn't fought with bullets or ballots, but with money itself? For over a century, a silent battle has raged between two forces, gold and paper. One represents hard, tangible value, something ancient civilizations trusted. The other, a promise backed by confidence, debt. But here's the mystery. How did we go from a world where money was gold to one where it's just numbers on a screen? And what if the system built on that shift is quietly collapsing again right now? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at money, inflation, or your bank account the same way again. Long before Wall Street and credit cards, money was something real: gold and silver coins. For thousands of years, from the pharaohs of Egypt to the merchants of Venice, gold wasn't just currency, it was trust. It couldn't be printed, couldn't default, and it couldn't vanish overnight. But as trade expanded and economies grew, carrying gold everywhere became impractical. So banks began offering something new: paper receipts, promising that a specific amount of gold was stored safely in their vaults. It seemed convenient, harmless even. People started exchanging those receipts instead of gold. But here's where the seed of the war was planted. The moment banks realized people rarely came to claim their gold, they printed more receipts than they had gold to back them. This wasn't economics. It was alchemy, turning paper into wealth, and the world didn't notice. Not yet. Fast forward to the 19th century, industrialization was booming. Empires needed money for wars, for expansion, for power. Enter the Bank of England, and later, the U.S. Federal Reserve. Both promised stability through a gold standard where each dollar or pound could be exchanged for gold. But every war, from Napoleon to World War I, tested that promise. Governments discovered a terrifying truth. Gold limited their power. You couldn't print gold to fund a war or a bailout, so they stopped trying. When World War I erupted, nations suspended the gold standard to print money freely. And just like that, the first shots of the gold versus paper war were fired. After the war, economies were shattered. Inflation soared. Germany's mark collapsed so badly that workers carried wages in wheelbarrows. The lesson? Paper money gives governments freedom, but freedom to destroy their own value. By 1944, with World War II nearing its end, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their mission: rebuild the world's financial system. The result was revolutionary and deceptive. The Bretton Woods Agreement made the US dollar the world's reserve currency. Other nations pegged their money to the dollar, and the dollar itself was pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. It sounded like a golden age of stability, but in reality, the US had just become the world's banker in the vault. Over the next 2 decades, something strange happened. The US printed dollars faster than it mined gold. Foreign governments, led by France under Charles de Gaulle, began demanding gold for their dollars. The vaults started to empty. The illusion cracked. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon went on national television to deliver a message that would rewrite global finance forever. I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily became permanent. Gold was no longer money. Paper had won. Or so we thought. The 1970s unleashed chaos. Without gold as an anchor, inflation exploded. Oil prices quadrupled. Savings lost value overnight. By 1980, an ounce of gold once worth $35 shot past $800. Paper money had broken free from its leash and immediately ran wild. Governments scrambled for control. Central banks learned they could manipulate economies, not just manage them. By raising or lowering interest rates, they could create booms or crush them. But here's the dark secret. Every solution they used just created bigger problems later. The 1980s brought credit bubbles. The 1990s brought dot-com bubbles. Every time a bubble burst, central banks printed more money to save the system, pushing us further from reality. It was no longer about gold or value or discipline. It was about control, and the people controlling it weren't elected. Today, the battle has gone digital. Central banks hold over 35,000 tons of gold, the most in half a century, while at the same time creating trillions in fiat currency. Why both? Because deep down, even they don't trust the system they built. Look at the data. Since 1971, the US dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. Global debt has soared past $300 trillion. And central banks are now experimenting with CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, promising convenience, but raising the specter of total financial surveillance. Meanwhile, countries like China, Russia, and India are quietly buying gold at record levels, preparing for a post-dollar world. Their message is clear. Paper can be printed. Gold cannot. But here's the twist. Every time paper wins, it collapses under its own weight. Every empire that abandoned sound money from Rome to Britain to modern America faced the same fate: inflation, inequality, and decay. This war isn't new, it's ancient. In the 3rd century, Rome faced a debt crisis. To pay for wars, Emperor Diocletian debased the silver denarius, mixing it with cheaper metals. Prices soared. Trade collapsed. Rome fell. Weimar Germany, the government printed marks endlessly to pay reparations. By 1923, bread cost billions of marks. Citizens burned currency to heat their homes. And now, modern economies are following the same script with fancier technology. Since 2008, the US Federal Reserve alone has created over $9 trillion out of thin air. Result: asset prices soared, stocks, housing, crypto, while wages stagnated. The rich became richer. The middle class drowned in debt. And once again, gold quietly began to rise. Because when paper burns, people run back to what's real. Most people think inflation is just rising prices. But the truth? It's a hidden tax, the most powerful weapon in the financial war. When governments print money, they're not creating wealth. They're stealing purchasing power from every dollar you already own. That's how central banks turn inflation into profit. They create new money, lend it to banks and governments, then collect interest on it. It's a silent siphoning, invisible, legal, and devastating. You work harder, your savings buy less, and the system quietly bleeds you dry, all while claiming it's stimulating the economy. Meanwhile, gold doesn't care. It just sits there, unchanging, untouchable, incorruptible. Every empire that turned away from it eventually crawled back. Now, a new front in the war is emerging: digital currencies. Central banks are testing systems where every transaction, every balance, every savings account could be monitored or controlled. They call it innovation. But to some, it's the final move in the war against real money. Imagine a world where your money expires if you don't spend it, where interest rates can go negative overnight, where savings are a privilege, not a right. That's not the future of finance. It's the end of financial freedom. And maybe that's why gold demand is quietly hitting record highs again. Every cycle ends the same way. Paper promises too much. Debt grows faster than production. Debt grows faster than production. Inflation rises, trust erodes, and a reset. The last reset was 1971. Some experts believe the next one is already in motion. Nations are diversifying away from the dollar. Global trade deals are being settled in gold or non-dollar currencies for the first time in decades. And central banks, the very institutions that killed the gold standard, are now buying gold faster than at any time since 1967. Why? Because when confidence breaks, paper burns. And gold doesn't ask for trust, it commands it. So what can we learn from this century-long battle between gold and paper? Every system built on debt eventually destroys itself. When money can be printed without limit, value disappears without warning. History doesn't just suggest this, it proves it. Real wealth isn't in currency, it's in what currency can T fake. Gold, land, skills, innovation, these hold value when paper collapses. The war isn't over, it's evolving. From gold coins to digital tokens, the fight for control over money is accelerating. The question now isn't who wins, it's who survives. Every generation thinks their money is safe, till it isn't. We trust paper because it's convenient. But gold doesn't ask for faith, it simply endures. The real question isn't will gold rise, it's when will confidence fall. Because in the end, Money isn't what we think it is. It's a mirror, reflecting how much we trust the people who print it, and that trust is fading fast. If you found this story eye-opening, hit subscribe. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the future of money, and remember, the war between gold and paper never ended. We're just living in its next chapter.